The master bathroom was warm, filled with the scent of lavender and the steady, rhythmic hiss of the shower that usually signaled the end of a long, ordinary Tuesday in their suburban Chicago home. But when the phone on the marble vanity buzzed, illuminating the dim room with a harsh white light, the notification didn't display a client's email or a family update. It was a message that lingered on the lock screen just long enough to shatter 10 years of marriage in a single heartbeat, revealing an intimacy that didn't belong to the man standing there. If you've ever wondered what happens in the silence after a heart breaks, or how love can twist into something colder and more dangerous, stay with me. We are just beginning to peel back the layers of a life that is about to unravel. The master bathroom smelled of eucalyptus and expensive humidity. It was a Tuesday night in November, and the wind off Lake Michigan was battering the floor-to-ceiling windows of their Evanston home. But inside, the air was still and warm. Ethan leaned against the marble double vanity, brushing his teeth, his eyes tracing the familiar grout lines of the shower tiles reflected in the mirror. Behind the frosted glass door, the water ran in a steady, aggressive stream. He could see the blurred silhouette of his wife, Elena, moving with the efficient grace she applied to everything: her career, her Pilates, her marriage. Buzz. The sound was short, sharp, and violent against the polished stone countertop. Ethan didn't look down immediately. Elena's phone was a permanent fixture in their lives, a third party in their marriage that demanded attention at all hours. She was a VP of communications. Crisis management didn't sleep, she often reminded him. Buzz. He rinsed his mouth, spat, and reached for a towel. His hand brushed against the device just as the screen lit up again. The notification banner was bright against the dark background of the locked screen. It wasn't a client. It wasn't her assistant, Sarah. Julian, work. I can still taste you. God, today was... The world didn't stop. The wind didn't cease howling outside. The shower didn't turn off. But inside Ethan's chest, something essential, a strut, a beam, a load-bearing wall of his existence, simply gave way. The collapse was silent and total. He stared at the words, the white Helvetica font searing itself into his retinas. Julian. He knew the name. The new creative director. Elena had mentioned him in passing over roasted chicken 3 weeks ago. Young, but visionary, she had said, her voice steady, her eyes on her fork. Ethan felt a physical blow to his stomach, a nausea so acute he had to grip the edge of the cold marble to keep from doubling over. I can still taste you. The crudeness of it, the visceral reality of those 5 words, stripped away 10 years of history. It wasn't an emotional confession of love. It was carnal, immediate, and happening now. Today. While Ethan had been reviewing blueprints for a high-rise in the Loop, his wife had been... The water shut off. The sudden silence in the bathroom was deafening. Ethan froze. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird, frantic and painful. He had seconds, maybe less. He stepped back from the vanity, his movements jerky and uncoordinated. He looked at his own reflection. His face was pale, his eyes wide and hollow. He looked like a man who had just witnessed a murder. He couldn't let her see this. Not yet. The glass door opened. Steam billowed out, carrying the scent of her body wash, a smell that used to mean home, now twisting into something cloying and suffocating. Elena stepped out, wrapping a plush white towel around her torso. Her wet hair was slicked back, her face scrubbed clean and pink from the heat. She looked beautiful. She looked innocent. "Hey," she said, her voice casual, light. She reached for a smaller towel to dry her face. "Did you take the trash out? I forgot to check." Ethan stared at her. He watched the water droplets trace a path down her collarbone. He thought about Julian. He thought about tasting. "Ethan." She paused, the towel lowered, looking at him with a furrow of concern that felt like a slap. "You okay? You look pale." He had to speak. He had to bridge the gap between the man he was 5 minutes ago and the ghost he was now. The instinct to scream, to smash the phone against the wall, to demand the truth, surged up his throat like bile. But then he looked at the phone, dark and silent again on the counter. If he screamed now, she would cry. She would apologize. She would spin a narrative of mistake and regret. She was in PR. She knew how to manage a crisis. She would control the story. Ethan forced the muscles of his face to move. He forced the corners of his mouth up. It felt like tearing skin. "Yeah," Ethan said, his voice sounding hollow, distant, like it was coming from the bottom of a well. "Just a headache. Long day." Elena studied him for a second longer, then shrugged, turning her back to him to face the mirror. She began applying her night cream, her movements rhythmic, practiced, calm. "Take some Advil," she said soothingly, not looking at him, looking only at her own perfect reflection. "I'm going to head to bed early. Big presentation tomorrow." "Right," Ethan whispered. "Big presentation." He watched her for a moment longer, the wife he loved, the stranger who had betrayed him. Then he turned and walked out of the bathroom, leaving the light on, leaving the phone on the counter. He walked into the dark bedroom and sat on the edge of the bed, his hands trembling in the shadows. He didn't take the Advil. He wanted the pain. He needed the pain to stay sharp. Because he wasn't going to sleep. He was going to think. The following morning was a masterclass in structural integrity. Ethan woke up 3 minutes before his alarm, his eyes gritty and dry, feeling the weight of the secret pressing against his ribs like a collapsed beam. Beside him, Elena was still asleep, her breathing rhythmic and soft. For a fleeting second, the morning sun filtering through the sheer curtains made everything look normal. Then, memory flooded back, cold, sharp, and absolute. He moved through the routine of getting ready with robotic precision. Shower, shave, coffee. In the kitchen, the domestic theater began. Elena came down 20 minutes later, dressed in a sharp charcoal blazer and skirt, her phone already in her hand. "Morning," she murmured, eyes scanning her screen. She poured coffee without looking at the pot. "Did you sleep okay? You were tossing and turning." "Fine," Ethan said. He was standing at the island, watching her thumb hover over the glass. Was she texting him? Was she telling Julian that she was awake? "Just work stress, the Whacker Drive project." "You work too hard," she said absently. Then, a small smile touched the corners of her lips. It wasn't for him. It was for the device. Ethan felt a surge of adrenaline so potent it made his hands shake. He gripped his mug tighter, the ceramic hot against his palm. "Good news?" he asked, the question casual, a trap laid in plain sight. Elena's head snapped up, the smile vanishing instantly, replaced by a smooth, professional mask. "Just Sarah, confirming the venue for the gala. It's a nightmare." "Right," Ethan said. "The gala." He kissed her goodbye at the door. It was the hardest thing he had ever done. He had to lean in, smell the perfume he had bought her for their anniversary, and press his lips to hers. She tasted of mint toothpaste and coffee. She tasted like a lie. Instead of driving to his firm, Ethan found himself navigating the morning traffic toward the Loop, toward the glass tower where Elena spent 50 hours a week. He needed to see the architecture of her other life. He needed to put a face to the name that had burned itself into his mind. He parked in the garage and took the elevator up to the 34th floor. The lobby of her agency was all polished concrete, mid-century furniture, and aggressive minimalism. He told the receptionist he was dropping off a charger Elena had forgotten, a lie he had fabricated by slipping her spare charger into his pocket before leaving the house. He waited. 5 minutes later, Elena appeared around the corner of the glass-walled corridor. She wasn't alone. Walking beside her was a man. He was younger than Ethan, perhaps early 30s, with messy on-purpose hair and a fitted sweater that looked expensive. He was talking with his hands, animated and energetic, and Elena was laughing, a genuine head-thrown-back laugh that Ethan hadn't heard in years. This was Julian. It had to be. The recognition was instinctive, primal. Ethan studied him like a structural flaw in a blueprint. Julian wasn't better looking, necessarily, but he was new. He was different. He was the excitement that Ethan's stable, predictable love could no longer provide. Elena saw Ethan and stopped, dead. Her laughter cut off as if a switch had been flipped. For a microsecond, panic widened her eyes, but she recovered instantly. "Ethan?" She walked toward him, her heels clicking on the concrete. "What are you doing here?" "You left this," Ethan said, holding up the white cord. "I was in the area for a site visit. Thought you might need it." "Oh," she said, taking it. Her fingers brushed his, and he didn't flinch. "You're a lifesaver. Thank you." The man, Julian, had stopped a few paces behind her. He was smiling politely, waiting to be introduced. He had no idea who Ethan was, or perhaps he did, and simply didn't care. "Ethan, this is Julian, our new creative director," Elena said, her voice tight. "Julian, this is my husband, Ethan." The word husband hung in the air, heavy and awkward. Julian stepped forward, extending a hand. "Pleasure to meet you, Ethan. Elena talks about you all the time." The audacity of it took the air out of Ethan's lungs. "Elena talks about you all the time." It was the kind of banal social lie people told to be polite. But in this context, it felt like a violation. Ethan took the hand. Julian's grip was firm, his palm warm. "Does she?" Ethan asked, holding the handshake a second too long, staring directly into Julian's eyes. He looked for guilt. He looked for mockery. He saw only confident arrogance. "I've heard a lot about you, too." He hadn't, of course, not until the text. But he saw a flicker of confusion in Julian's eyes, a momentary hesitation. "Good things, I hope," Julian joked, pulling his hand back. "Impressive things," Ethan replied, his voice flat. He turned his gaze back to Elena. She was watching them, her posture stiff, her knuckles white where she gripped the charger. She sensed the tension, but she couldn't name it. She was terrified he would make a scene, but Ethan had no intention of making a scene. A scene was messy. A scene was temporary. Ethan was an engineer. He was interested in controlled demolition. "I should let you two get back to it," Ethan said, checking his watch. "Big presentation, right?" "Right," Elena exhaled, her shoulders dropping slightly. "Thanks for the charger, honey." Anytime, Ethan said. He walked to the elevator, feeling their eyes on his back. As the doors slid shut, cutting off the view of his wife standing next to her lover, Ethan didn't feel the relief of escape. He felt a cold, hard resolve settling in his gut. He had seen the enemy. He had shaken his hand. And now, he knew exactly how to break him. The house at 2 a.m. was a different creature than the house at noon. Without the sunlight reflecting off the lake, the glass walls turned into black mirrors, reflecting only the interior emptiness. Ethan sat in his study, the glow of his laptop screen the only light in the room. Upstairs, Elena was asleep. He had listened to her breathing settle into the deep, slow rhythm of the guiltless before slipping out of bed. He had told her he had work to catch up on. It wasn't a lie. He was an engineer, and he had found a crack in the foundation. Now he had to map the extent of the rot. He wasn't hacking. He didn't need to. They had shared passwords for a decade, a convenience of modern marriage that assumed a baseline of trust. He opened the browser and navigated to the family's shared cloud account. He had his own login, but he knew hers, E. Caldwell 88. It was painfully simple. He logged in. The folder structure was neat, organized by year and event. Taxes, house, vacations. He bypassed those and went to the synced device backups. His heart wasn't racing anymore. It was beating with a slow, heavy thud, like a pile driver. He started with the bank statements, pulling up the credit card she used for personal expenses. He opened a spreadsheet on a separate tab and began to cross-reference dates. October 14th, Elena's calendar. Client dinner, West Loop. Bank statement. The aviary, $240. Ethan paused. The aviary was intimate, dark, experimental, not a place for a client dinner. He checked the time of the charge, 11:45 p.m. She had come home at 12:30 complaining about a difficult client who wouldn't sign. September 2nd. Elena's calendar. Late night at the office. Bank statement. Uber trip, starting from North Wells Street. Ethan Googled the address. It was a residential high-rise. He checked the property records. It wasn't an office building. It was a luxury apartment complex. He felt a cold numbness spreading through his fingertips. This wasn't a drunken mistake. This was logistics. This was a schedule. He moved to the photo backup. The stream was mostly mundane, screenshots of recipes, photos of the dog, work events. But then he saw the gaps. There were periods of time where the backup had been disabled, then re-enabled. He scrolled back to August, their anniversary trip to Napa. He remembered that trip vividly. They had walked through the vineyards, and he had felt, for the first time in a while, that they were reconnecting. He clicked on a photo from that weekend. It was a picture of the view from their balcony, the sun setting over the vines. He checked the metadata. Taken at 6:14 p.m. Then he saw the next image. It was a screenshot of a text conversation, evidently saved by accident, or perhaps for the thrill of it. Elena, the view is beautiful, but I wish you were standing here instead. Julian. Soon. Just get through the weekend. Playing house is exhausting, I know. Playing house. Ethan closed his eyes, the words burning behind his eyelids. The memory of that evening, Elena smiling at him over a glass of Cabernet, touching his hand, laughing at his joke, warped and twisted. She hadn't been connecting with him. She had been enduring him. She had been managing him like a difficult account while her mind was thousands of miles away with Julian. He opened his eyes and stared at the screen. He wasn't just losing his wife. He was losing his history. Every smile, every touch, every moment of kindness over the last 6 months was now suspect. She had built a parallel reality, a secret room in the architecture of their life where she was vibrant and passionate, leaving Ethan to live in the foyer. He navigated to the deleted folder in her notes app, which often synced before being fully purged. There was one note, dated 2 weeks ago. It wasn't a list. It was a draft. I don't know how much longer I can do this. I look at him and I feel nothing but guilt and pity. He's a good man, but he's just there. He's safe. You make me feel alive. I need to figure out the timing. Maybe after the holidays. Pity. That was the word that broke him. Anger he could handle. Betrayal he could process. But pity? To be the object of her charity? To be the safe option she kept around while she figured out her exit strategy? Ethan pushed the laptop away. The silence of the house felt heavy, pressing in on his eardrums. He looked at his hands. They looked the same as they had yesterday, but they felt different. They were the hands of a man who was being pitied. He stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the dark, sleeping street. A coyote trotted across the road under the street lamp, a shadow hunting in the suburbs. Ethan realized then that he wasn't going to confront her with the credit card statements. He wasn't going to scream about the note. That was what a husband would do. And she didn't see him as a husband anymore. She saw him as an obstacle. If she wanted to play games with time and reality, he would join the game. He wouldn't give her the timing she wanted. He wouldn't let her wait until after the holidays to destroy him on her terms. He went back to the computer. He didn't close the tabs. Instead, he took out his own phone and took a photo of the screen, the bank statement, the Uber ride, the pity note. He wasn't digging for answers anymore. He was mining for ammunition. Wednesday began with a deceptive calm. The sky over Chicago was a bruised purple, threatening snow. But inside Ethan's office, the atmosphere was sterile and controlled. He sat at his desk. The blueprints for the Wacker Drive project rolled out before him, but his attention was focused on the phone in his hand. He wasn't checking texts this time. He was making a call. "Boca, reservations," a hostess answered, her voice professional and crisp. "Hi," Ethan said, his voice smooth, carrying the easy confidence of a man handling domestic minutiae. "This is Ethan Caldwell. My wife Elena has a reservation for 6 tonight at 7:30 under her firm's name. It's for the tech merger client." "One moment, Mr. Caldwell. Yes, I see it here. Table 42. "Right. Look, I'm so sorry, but she's been pulled into a crisis meeting and got the dates mixed up. She asked me to call and cancel. She's going to try to reschedule for next week." "Oh, I see. That's unfortunate. We have a wait list for tonight, so—" I know, it's a mess. Just go ahead and release the table. She'll reach out when her schedule clears." "Canceled. Thank you for letting us know." "No problem." Ethan ended the call. He set the phone down on the desk, aligning it perfectly parallel with the edge of his ruler. It was a small thing, a reservation. But for Elena, whose entire affair and life was built on the precise orchestration of time and perception, it was a structural load she wasn't designed to carry. He spent the next hour moving $40,000 from their primary joint checking account into a locked-term treasury bond. He flagged the transfer as tax shelter strategy, urgent. It wasn't theft. It was aggressive fiscal responsibility. If she asked, He was just looking out for their future. The notification would hit her email, but she likely wouldn't check it until she tried to use the card linked to that balance. By the time he got home, the house was quiet. He poured himself a glass of scotch and waited. Elena burst through the door at 6:15 p.m., a whirlwind of nervous energy. She wasn't wearing her usual composed mask. Her eyes were wide, and there was a sheen of perspiration on her forehead, despite the cold outside. "I am so late," she announced, dropping her bag on the island. "Traffic was a nightmare. And Julian, the team is still tweaking the pitch deck." Ethan took a slow sip of his drink. "Rough day?" "You have no idea," she said, rushing past him to the bedroom. "I have to change. This dinner is make or break. If we land this, the partners promised me the corner office." Ethan followed her to the doorway of the bedroom. He leaned against the frame, watching her strip off her blazer and pull a silk dress from the closet. She was frantic, her movements jerky. "You'll crush it," Ethan said. "You always do." "I hope so," she muttered, struggling with the zipper. "Can you—" He stepped forward. His hand brushed the bare skin of her back as he pulled the zipper up. He lingered for a moment at the nape of her neck, right where he knew Julian had probably kissed her. He felt her muscles tense under his touch. "Thanks," she breathed, stepping away quickly. "I have to go." She was halfway to the door when her phone rang. Ethan watched her check the screen. Her face went slack. "Hello, yes, this is Elena." Ethan went back to the kitchen and picked up his scotch. He didn't need to hear the other side of the conversation. He could read the collapse in her posture. "What do you mean, canceled?" Elena's voice pitched up, sharp and incredulous. "I didn't cancel it. No, that's impossible. My assistant confirmed it yesterday." Silence. Then desperation. "You gave the table away? But this is— You don't understand. I have 5 executives meeting me there in 20 minutes. You have to fit us in. I don't care where." She listened for another moment, then pulled the phone away from her ear, staring at it as if it had bitten her. "They hung up," she whispered. She looked at Ethan, panic stripping away, her sophistication. "The reservation is gone. They said someone called to cancel. Sarah must have screwed up. God, she's incompetent." "That's strange," Ethan said, his voice level. "Maybe you mentioned it to someone else? Or maybe the system glitched?" "It doesn't matter," she snapped, pacing the kitchen. "I can't take them to a dive bar, Ethan. This is $1 million account." She started scrolling frantically through her phone, dialing other restaurants. Alinea, Girl and the Goat, Smith, all fully booked. It was Wednesday night in Chicago. High-end tables didn't just appear. "Why don't you try the club?" Ethan suggested helpfully. "It's stuffy, but it's quiet." Elena looked at him with disdain. "The club? It's for old men, Ethan. Julian. The client wants vibe. They want energy." "Right," Ethan said. "Julian wants energy." She froze, her thumb hovering over the screen. She caught the edge in his voice, or maybe she was just projecting her own guilt. "The client," she corrected, her voice tight. "I have to go. I'll figure it out on the way." She grabbed her purse and rushed for the door. Just as she reached the handle, she stopped. "My card," she muttered, patting her bag. She pulled out her wallet and checked. Okay, I can fix this." "Drive safe," Ethan called out. The door slammed shut. The house settled back into silence. Ethan walked to the window and watched her taillights disappear down the driveway. He knew exactly what would happen next. She would scramble to find a mediocre backup option. She would be flustered, apologetic, and off her game. And when the bill came and she tried to put it on the joint card to impress the client and Julian, it would decline. She would be humiliated in front of the man she was sleeping with and the people she needed to impress. Ethan took another sip of scotch. It burned, warm and grounding. He wasn't pitying her. He was teaching her. She wanted excitement. She wanted a life that wasn't safe. He was happy to provide it. The invitation sat on the kitchen island like a threat. It was made of heavy, cream-colored cardstock, the edges gilded in gold leaf, the typography embossed and elegant. The Chicago Arts and Media Charity Gala. Ethan stood over it, a mug of black coffee in his hand, reading the text he had already memorized. Honoring the visionaries of the year. Elena's name wasn't on the front, but she was one of the honorees. It was the night she had been working toward for 3 years. It was the night that was supposed to cement her promotion, her status, and her future. Elena entered the kitchen cautiously. Since Wednesday night, since the humiliation of the lost reservation and the declined card, she had been walking on eggshells. She had explained the card decline as a fraud alert glitch, a lie Ethan had accepted with a sympathetic nod, even though he was the one who had triggered the freeze. She moved around him to get to the fridge, her body language tight. She was wearing her weekend armor, expensive yoga pants and a cashmere hoodie, but her face looked tired. The stress of managing a high-pressure job and a high-intensity affair was beginning to show in the faint lines around her mouth. "You saw it," she said, nodding toward the invitation. Her voice was casual, but her eyes were watchful. "Hard to miss," Ethan said, taking a sip of coffee. "It's fancy. Gold leaf?" "It's a big deal, Ethan," she said, leaning against the counter, crossing her arms. "The partners are going to be there. The board. Everyone." "And Julian?" The name slipped out smoothly, wrapped in innocence. Ethan watched her pupil dilate, just a fraction. "Ideally, yes," she said, looking away to check the coffee pot. "The creative team has to be there. They designed the campaign we're being honored for." "Makes sense," Ethan said. He let the silence stretch. He knew what she wanted. She needed him to commit. In her world, the supportive husband was a key accessory, as essential as the right clutch or the diamond earrings. Without him standing by her side, smiling and holding her drink, the rumors would start. Trouble in paradise? Is she focused too much on her career? "I need you to come," Elena said finally, turning back to him. There was a note of pleading in her voice that was rare for her. "I know things have been weird lately, with the bank stuff and your work stress, but I really need this night to go perfectly." Ethan set his mug down. He looked at his wife. He thought about the man who had texted her while she was naked in their shower. He thought about the pity note. He's safe. If he said no, he would hurt her. He would ruin her night. It would be a small, petty victory. But if he said yes, he would be inside the fortress. He would be in the room with Julian, with her boss, with the people whose admiration she craved like a drug. He would be there when the trap he was building finally snapped shut. A slow smile spread across Ethan's face. It felt foreign, like a mask he was pulling too tight. But to Elena, it must have looked like reassurance. "Of course I'll come," Ethan said, his voice warm, terrifyingly sincere. "I wouldn't miss it. It's your big night, Elle. You deserve to be celebrated." Relief washed over her face so visibly it was almost pathetic. Her shoulders dropped. She let out a breath she had been holding for days. "Thank you," she said softly. She walked over and hugged him. Ethan didn't hug back immediately. He stood there, his arms at his sides, feeling the warmth of her body against his. She smelled like lavender and betrayal. Finally, he brought his hand up and patted her back, a gesture more patronizing than affectionate. "What should I wear?" he asked, pulling away. "The tux?" "The tux would be perfect," she said, smiling now, her confidence returning. "You look so handsome in it." "I want to look my best," Ethan said, picking up the invitation again and running his thumb over the gold lettering. "I want everyone to see exactly who we are." Elena beamed, missing the double meaning entirely. She was already mentally moving on to logistics, hair appointments, car service, seating charts. She thought she had handled him. She thought the crisis was averted. "I'm going to book a car," she said, pulling out her phone, "so we can drink." "Good idea," Ethan said. "I have a feeling it's going to be a night to remember." He watched her type, her thumbs flying across the screen, likely sending a quick update to Julian. "He's coming. Behave." Ethan turned back to the window. The sky was gray and heavy, promising a storm. He felt a strange sense of calm. The date was set. The venue was chosen. Now all he had to do was prepare the entertainment. The courier office was a small, dusty storefront on the outskirts of the city, far removed from the glass and steel canyons of the Loop. Ethan stood at the counter, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and paying in cash. He wasn't mailing a bomb, but the envelope in his hand carried enough explosive potential to level a relationship. Inside was a simple photocopy of a receipt he had pulled from the cloud backup. It was for a bouquet of lilies sent to Elena's office 3 months ago, accompanied by a note. "For the nights we can't get back. J." The address on the package wasn't Julian's office. It was the apartment Julian shared with his fiancée, Chloe. Ethan had found Chloe's name and address with a simple background check. She was a pediatric nurse, oblivious and innocent. The package was marked personal and confidential, addressed directly to her. "Standard delivery?" the clerk asked, chewing gum. "Priority," Ethan said, sliding a $20 bill across the counter. "It needs to arrive tomorrow morning." He walked out into the biting wind, feeling a dark, cold satisfaction. By tomorrow noon, Julian would be fielding questions he couldn't answer. The stress would fracture his focus right before the biggest professional night of his life. Ethan returned home as the sun was setting. The house was warm, the smell of roasted vegetables filling the kitchen. Elena was at the stove, stirring a pan, her phone propped up against the backsplash, silent but ever present. "You're home early," she said, offering a tight smile. She looked tired. The cracks were starting to show. The strain of the declined card, the lost reservation, the pressure of the upcoming gala. She was juggling too many lies, and the weight was heavy. "I picked up something for you," Ethan said, placing a small, velvet-wrapped box on the marble island. Elena froze, the wooden spoon stilling in the pan. She looked at the box, then at him. There was a flicker of guilt in her eyes, followed quickly by the mask of gratitude she wore so well these days. "Ethan, you didn't have to. I wanted to," he interrupted softly. "For Saturday. For the gala." She wiped her hands on a towel and reached for the box. Her fingers trembled slightly as she lifted the lid. Inside lay a necklace, a single, teardrop-shaped onyx stone suspended on a delicate, yet strong, silver chain. It was beautiful, expensive, and dark. "It's stunning," she breathed, though her voice wavered. It wasn't her usual style. She preferred gold, light, airy things. This was heavy. This was grounding. "Turn around," Ethan said. She obeyed, lifting her hair off her neck. Ethan stepped behind her. He lifted the necklace, the silver cooling against his fingertips. He draped it around her throat, watching the black stone settle into the hollow of her collarbone. He fastened the clasp. It clicked with a sound that felt final. He didn't pull away immediately. He kept his hands on her shoulders, his thumbs pressing lightly into the tension knots at the base of her neck. He leaned in close, his breath brushing her ear. "It reminded me of you," he whispered. "Complex. Mysterious." Elena stiffened. She stared at herself in the reflection of the dark window in front of them. The necklace looked like a collar. The black stone looked like a bruise against her pale skin. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely audible. "It's perfect." "I want you to wear it on Saturday," Ethan said, his hands sliding down her arms, trapping her in a mock embrace. "I want everyone to see how much you're loved." Her phone on the counter lit up. Buzz. Ethan saw her eyes dart to it in the reflection. He felt the spike in her heart rate through her back. She wanted to check it. She was desperate to check it. Julian was probably texting her about the presentation, or perhaps he was already feeling the premonition of the storm Ethan had just mailed to his door. "Aren't you going to get that?" Ethan asked, not letting go. "No," Elena said, forcing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She placed her hand over his on her shoulder, her skin cold. "It's just work. It can wait." "Good," Ethan said. He kissed the side of her head, right above the heavy silver chain. "Because I want your full attention tonight." He released her and walked to the refrigerator to grab a beer. Behind him, Elena stood motionless, her hand clutching the black stone at her throat, as if it were choking her. She looked at the phone, then at the necklace, and for the first time, Ethan saw true fear in her eyes. She didn't know what he knew, but she could feel the walls closing in. The grand ballroom of the Palmer House was a cavern of gold leaf and crystal, humming with the murmur of Chicago's elite. The air smelled of expensive perfume, prime rib, and ambition. Under the massive chandeliers, hundreds of people in tuxedos and gowns moved like sharks in a reef, smiling with their teeth. Ethan sat at table 1 right next to the stage. Beside him, Elena was vibrating with adrenaline. She looked radiant in a silver gown that clung to her frame like liquid mercury. The heavy onyx necklace Ethan had given her resting stark and black against her throat. She gripped his hand tightly under the tablecloth, her palm damp. "They're about to announce it," she whispered, squeezing his fingers. "God, I think I'm going to be sick." "You'll be fine," Ethan said, his voice steady. He didn't squeeze back. "You've earned this." Across the table sat the senior partners of her firm, men and women who held the keys used to the corner office Elena coveted. And 2 seats down sat Julian. Julian looked like a man who had seen a ghost. His usually perfectly messy hair was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. He kept checking his phone under the table, his leg bouncing nervously. Ethan knew why. The package, the receipt for the lilies and the note, had arrived at Julian's apartment that morning. Chloe, his fiancée, hadn't called him all day. Ethan caught Julian's eye. He held the gaze. He didn't blink. He raised his champagne flute in a silent, mocking toast. Julian swallowed hard, looking away, terrified. He sensed the predator in the room, but he couldn't scream without exposing himself. And now, the MC's voice boomed through the speakers, to honor the creative visionary of the year, please welcome Elena Caldwell. The applause was thunderous. The room erupted. Elena stood up, her face flushed with triumph. She smoothed her dress, flashed a dazzling smile at the partners, and squeezed Ethan's shoulder. "Thank you for being here," she whispered to him. "I love you." The lie hung in the air, suspended in the applause. Ethan watched her walk up the stairs to the stage. The spotlight hit her, turning her into a glowing idol. She took the microphone, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "Thank you," she began, looking out at the sea of faces. "This award means everything to me. In this industry, we talk a lot about image, about perception. But true success comes from integrity. It comes from the people who support you when the lights are off." She looked down at the table. She looked at Julian. She looked at Ethan. "I want to thank my team," she said, nodding to Julian, who looked like he might vomit. "And my husband, Ethan, my rock, my moral compass." The room awed. Ethan kept his face perfectly still, a mask of stone. As she continued to speak about honesty and dedication, Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his tuxedo jacket. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope. It wasn't sealed. He placed it gently on the center of the table, right next to the centerpiece of white orchids. It was positioned directly in front of the senior managing partner, a gray-haired man named Robert, who prided himself on family values. "Ethan," Robert whispered, leaning in, confused. "Is this for her?" "It's for everyone," Ethan said softly. On top of the papers inside the envelope, visible as the flap fell open, was the photo from the shower. The text message, clear and bright. "I can still taste you." Beneath it were the bank statements, the Uber logs to the apartment, and the pity note. Ethan stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor, but the sound was drowned out by the applause as Elena finished her speech. She was beaming, clutching the glass trophy, walking down the stairs. She was looking for his eyes, looking for his approval. She saw him standing. She saw him turn his back. Ethan didn't wait for her to return to the seat. He didn't wait for the scream or the gasp. He began to walk toward the exit, weaving through the tables with the easy stride of a man unburdened. He heard the applause die down as she reached the table. He heard the silence ripple outward from table 1 as Robert picked up the envelope. He heard the sudden, confused murmur as Elena's voice cut through the quiet, sharp and panicked. "Ethan? Ethan, where are you going?" He didn't look back. He pushed through the heavy double doors of the ballroom, stepping out into the cool, quiet corridor. The muffled sound of the gala faded behind him, replaced by the hum of the hotel's HVAC system. He checked his watch. 9:42 p.m. The car was waiting. The house was already packed. The demolition was complete. The dust would settle, but he wouldn't be there to sweep it up. "Sir?" a valet asked as Ethan stepped out onto the windy Chicago street. "Are you waiting for your wife?" Ethan buttoned his coat against the chill. Ideally, he would feel sadness. Ideally, he would feel regret. But all he felt was the clean, empty sensation of a structure that had been safely brought down. "No," Ethan said, looking at the city lights reflecting in the wet pavement. "My wife is busy." He walked into the night alone. The house was darker than it had ever been. Ethan had turned off the accent lights, the landscape uplighting, and the warm glow of the foyer chandelier. The only illumination came from the street lamps filtering through the floor-to-ceiling glass, casting long, distorted shadows across the hardwood floors. Ethan stood in the center of the living room. It wasn't empty. The furniture was still there, the art still on the walls, but the soul of the house was gone. His bags were packed and waiting by the front door. 2 suitcases. That was the sum total of 10 years. He heard the car pull into the driveway at 11:15 p.m. The engine cut, but the door didn't open immediately. She was sitting there, gathering herself, rehearsing. When the front door finally clicked open, the sound was like a gunshot in the silence. Elena stepped inside. She looked like the survivor of a natural disaster. The silver dress was wrinkled, the hem dragged on the floor. Her hair, so perfect on stage, was pulling loose from its pins. She wasn't wearing the onyx necklace. She was clutching her clutch bag with white-knuckled force. She saw him standing there. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things. She just leaned back against the heavy oak door, as if her legs could no longer support the weight of her own narrative. "You destroyed me," she whispered. Her voice was raspy, stripped of its PR polish. "In front of everyone. Robert, the board, my entire life." "I didn't destroy anything, Elena," Ethan said. His voice was calm, terrifyingly conversational. "I just turned on the lights." She pushed off the door, walking unsteadily into the room. Her eyes were red, swollen. "You could have just left. You could have filed for divorce. Why did you have to burn it all down?" "Because you didn't just cheat," Ethan replied. He walked over to the kitchen island, the same island where he had put the necklace on her, where she had lied about the reservation. He picked up a piece of paper he had left there. It was the printout of her note. "He's safe." He slid it across the marble toward her. "I could handle the sex, maybe," Ethan said, watching her eyes drop to the paper. "I could handle the anger, but I couldn't handle the pity. You kept me around like a pet, Elena, a safety net, while you auditioned for a better life." Elena stared at the note. She recognized it instantly. A fresh wave of tears spilled over, but this time, there was no defense. She slumped onto one of the bar stools, burying her face in her hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this," she sobbed. "I was going to tell you. I was confused." "You weren't confused," Ethan corrected her gently. "You were bored, and now you're not." He looked around the kitchen one last time. The stainless steel appliances, the imported tile, the life they had curated to look perfect from the outside. It all felt like a set for a movie that had wrapped production. "Julian left the gala, by the way," Elena said, her voice muffled by her hands. "Chloe threw him out. He called me. He blamed me." "He seems like the type," Ethan said. He felt nothing. No triumph. No vindication. Just a profound exhaustion. "I'm sure you two will figure it out. Or you won't." He picked up his keys. The house key, the mail key, the fob for the alarm system. He placed them on the counter next to the note. The metal clinked softly against the stone. "I transferred half the savings to your personal account," Ethan said. "The lawyers will handle the rest. I'm staying at a hotel downtown until I find a place." Elena looked up, Her makeup was smeared, her eyes hollow. She looked small. "Ethan," she said, her voice cracking. "What am I supposed to do?" It was the first honest question she had asked him in months. Ethan picked up his suitcases. He walked to the door, the wheels rolling smoothly over the floorboards. He stopped at the threshold and looked back. She was sitting alone in the dark kitchen of the beautiful house, wearing a ruined dress, surrounded by the debris of her own choices. "You're the visionary, Elena," Ethan said, opening the door to the cold night air. "You'll think of something." He stepped out and closed the door behind him. He didn't slam it. He just clicked it shut, sealing the silence inside. The wind off Lake Michigan was biting, stinging his face, but it felt clean. He walked to his car, threw the bags in the back, and got in. As he backed out of the driveway, he didn't look up at the bedroom window. He didn't look at the house. He put the car in drive and turned onto the street, the headlights cutting a path through the darkness, moving forward, away from the ruin, into a future that was empty and quiet, and finally, his own.